Bye-bye. Still some tickets available at the Theatre Royal.
You don't.
So welcome back to the Town Hall Theatre here in Dungarvan, where our candidates' debate is underway. Thank you very much. Now, before the break, we had a question from Jenny Beresford, who had her hat on and off Dungarvan West Waterford Chamber of Commerce, to do with the universal social charge and whether or not it should be reversed after the next election, because it appears to be taking a lot of money out of customers, I suppose, consumers' pockets, and is affecting small businesses a lot in that way. Justin, can I go to you, Justin Connery, first of all, on that particular question? What do you think of that?
Okay, so you can go about give them physically more money so that they have more money in their pockets, or you can allow them to buy more with the money that they already have. So what I'm saying is that instead of giving people more money because we're bankrupt, we don't have that money, again, we need to reduce the charges to businesses. So we need to reduce rates, we need to reduce the cost of electricity, we need to reduce the cost of refuse, we need to reduce the cost of water, and that will increase the spending power that people have in their pockets. Now, before we move on to the other candidates, I'd like to make one more point. The fact of the matter, and this is before the other candidates answer this question, the fact of the matter, and I didn't make it like this, and I don't want it to be like this, but the fact of the matter is that every single one of us are going to be paying more tax for the next 3 years if we carry on going down the route we're going. So if somebody says they're going to reduce or remove the universal social charge, they need to account for how they're going to do that.
Okay, thank you for that, Justin. Ciara, would you like to come to us next on this?
I suppose it's worth remembering that the universal social charges come in on the back of a lot of other cuts that people have, particularly in the public sector. Like the HSE is the single biggest employer in Waterford City and County, and they already have been, they've been cut in terms of their pension levy and in terms of, increments and that not been awarded. So this is another, chunk taken out of people's wages. So the Labour Party have made a solemn commitment that anybody earning under 100,000 will not face another increase in income tax if and when we're in government.
Including universal social
yeah,
charge.
Well, unfortunately, we're not in the position to reverse it as it is. But I mean, but we are a party that does believe that those who have the most should pay the most, and overwhelmingly on the doorsteps. And believe me, I've knocked on a few doors in the last couple of weeks. Like, people just think things are not fair. It's the people in the middle who are getting squashed and pulled from all of the time. And okay, I mean, I suppose I've maybe singled out the public sector, but I understand that people in the private sector are equally. I work for an NGO myself, and when I open my wage package at the end of the month, it makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Now, there's one man that I'm quoting time and time again that I met in Lismore, and he said this to me, and I think it's a very, it puts it in real terms for people. He said, when is the last time Micheál Martin, or anybody for that matter in the Dáil, pushed his trolley around SuperValu or Tesco's and did a week's shopping? Because the reality is food prices have not come down, and yet disposable income is falling all the time, which is having a huge impact on small businesses and local economies. And if people do not have the disposable income, it is the people in the small towns such as Dungarvan, such as Tremor and Waterford City that will suffer.
Okay, thank you for that, Ciara. John Deasy, will Fine Gael reduce the universal social charge if you come into government?
Well, just picking up on what Justin said, I think he makes a fair point. I remember being in the Dáil when the budget was printed. This charge was introduced, and it caught my eye, the fine print, immediately. It struck me that I think it was a 5.7% increase for those people who are earning approximately 15,000, and people earning over 100,000 were only seeing a 1.1% increase. And what I'm finding is that even though Fine Gael is not going to say that they're going to reverse this, there is disproportionality here, and we need to take account of disproportionality. So what we're doing right now is, we've asked the Department of Finance to cost the entire universal social charge and look across the board the tax bands, because every time you widen a tax band, there will be disproportionality, and take a look at it then.
Okay. Will we move on to the next question? Tom Higgins, first of all, Independent.
Could I just say that this increases the tax yield, the universal social charge. significantly by up to 7% in some cases. But say somebody who pays in the upper limit of taxation around 41%, they also have the universal social charge now, which is about 7%. They have health levy 2%, PRSI 3%. So, a person on 41% can sometimes pay up to 53 to 55% tax.
So what party in government would you support, or whose policies as an independent in the next government in relation to the universal social charge, Tom?
Well, politics is the art of the possible, and I'll have to review the situation if I'm lucky enough to be elected.
Fair enough, thank you for that. Let's move on to our next question, which is to do with social welfare versus work. Clinton Connage has that question for us. Clinton. Will I read out the question, Clinton? Do you prefer that? Yeah, okay. Clinton says, there's little incentive for the long-term unemployed and lone parents to actively search for employment, as the value of their benefits from social welfare, council house, family income supplement, medical cards, etc., would be higher than the average starting wage for unpaid work. I suppose, or for basic minimum wage, say. Do you intend to recognise this and implement change, or will you continue to discriminate in their favour at the cost of the average PAYE contributor? Who would like to be first in that? John Deasy's hand is up.
Yeah, look, it's a pet issue with me as well. I think that when you look at self-employed people and what they contribute all through their lifetimes, in many cases 30, 40 years, and then when they're unemployed, if their spouse makes over €400, they're not even entitled to the job seekers allowance. And worse in some cases is the fact that they're not entitled to retraining. They don't get the back education allowance, they don't get work placements, and these are the self-starters. These are the people over the last 10 years who provided jobs. They're the ones who actually create growth in this country, and they're leaving. They can't get, for the first time in their lives, they've been asked or they've asked the state for assistance, and the state has shown them the door, and they're leaving. And we're losing a massive amount of the entrepreneurs in this country, the self-starters. We have got to, at the very least, allow them to be retrained, to avail of those training programs that the state does provide, if they're paying every year into the social insurance fund.
Okay, so social welfare versus work. Brendan Keneally?
There's two things here. One of the things we have done in the last two budgets is we have actually reduced the rates of job seekers allowance, job seekers benefit. Now, we're taking an awful lot of flack for that, but the reason for doing that is precisely to try and deal with the problem is there in the incentive to work. And there has to be an incentive to work. And there are people out there who are suffering at the moment. They don't mind paying their fair share, but they are getting very annoyed when they see a situation where there's people they know who probably never worked a day in their life, never want to, and I'm not talking about the genuine people who are getting social welfare out there. They're quite entitled to it, but there are others who have never done anything for it, and they have to be weeded out of the system. And Eamon O'Keefe, as our minister in that area, had started a scheme, and I would like to see it continuing on, whereby people would have to take up some sort of community work in order to get that payment, and if they didn't, they wouldn't get the payment. It has to be rebalanced back in favour of the person who's going to work. There has to be an incentive to work, or the whole system will collapse around us.
Ciara,
sorry, could I just say one other
Brendan,
thing?
yeah.
I agree entirely with what John has said in relation to the self-employed, because that is something that's come across to me very, very much on this campaign trail. It never mattered too much in the past, because somebody who was self-employed, if he happened to be out of work for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks or whatever, he didn't worry too much about it because he was going to go back into employment again. That's not now happening. And there should be some sort of a mechanism, and that is something we're going to have to take a serious look at, that those people will be able to draw something from the state.
Okay, Ciara, on that question, I guess, about the self-employed people struggling without social welfare, what's the Labour's policy on that?
Well, I mean, there's no doubt but that I suppose the economic crisis has exposed the particular vulnerabilities of the self-employed, and the Labour are committed to reviewing the position of how self-employed people are protected under the Social Protection Code as it is. Well, what I would say, though, in relation to this, I mean, the biggest misnomer, in my opinion, is to pay people to do nothing. But currently, the way the social welfare is constructed is you have people caught in a poverty trap. That if they do go back to work, they are less well off. That just can't. So we need to look at now. When Joan Burton was Minister for Social and Family Affairs, she had a number of initiatives that allowed people to return to work, and on a sliding scale, they would I suppose, retain their benefits and hold on to their medical card, particularly for, single parents who are, per capita, they're the highest proportion of people at risk of poverty. So we have to look at how we can alleviate that poverty trap so that we can get people into work and get them into retraining. Because as I said, the biggest misnomer is, and I agree, is to pay people to do nothing. And as said, I do think we need to re-examine under the Social Protection Code to ensure that there is safeguards there for people who are self-employed, the people who take the risk.
Okay.
But I just what I'd like to say as well, that the Labour Party are committed and absolutely to weeding out fraud in the welfare, because we believe that the welfare bill and every cent, and believe me, there's not much of it left there to give, needs to go to the people who need it. And it's worth noting that Ireland, even through all the boom years, has the second highest rate of child poverty in Europe. That is a scandalous statistic.
Okay, thank you, Kieran. Tom Higgins, in relation to being a disincentive for people to go back to work if they're on benefit.
I'd just like to just point out an aside here. The self-employed unemployed are a group that are sadly not treated very well in this recession. They say that it hasn't been quantified how many self-employed unemployed people there are in the country, but probably the revenue commissioners would have some figures on this. But it is thought that there's at least 150,000 people in the country who were running successful businesses during the boom, and they had up to 12 people employed. And when their workers finally, when the business hit the wall, every worker that this employer would have all got benefit, social protection, probably a package of up to 20,000. And who did they not pay and look after? They didn't look after the self-employed unemployed.
Okay, Tom, thank you for that. We're going to come back with more after this break.